5 years ago, at the age of 18, my parents requested that I vacate our home to make room for my pregnant sister and her boyfriend, prioritizing their needs over mine. As a result, I faced several challenging years, only to have my parents later reappear, seeking my financial assistance for my sister after her boyfriend abandoned her. Allow me to provide a detailed account of these events. At 18, I found myself compelled to leave the family home, a decision made by my parents to accommodate my sister's boyfriend. My sister Chloe, who is 4 years my senior, discovered she was pregnant at the age of 22. At that time, Chloe had been employed for a few months, but had not accumulated sufficient savings to support a child and live independently. Consequently, she moved back in with our parents. Approximately 3 months into her pregnancy, Chloe decided it was essential for her boyfriend to move in as well, under the belief that their child's proper development required the presence of both parents. This notion seemed unreasonable to me, given the limited space in our home. I anticipated that our parents would reject Chloe's request, but to my astonishment, they not only agreed, but also intended to evict me to accommodate him. A few months after Chloe's return, my parents informed me of their plan to have her boyfriend move in. They expected me to relinquish my room and, ultimately, to leave the house entirely, arguing that, as an 18-year-old, it was time for me to strike out on my own. I was taking a gap year and had no immediate plans to attend college, making this decision all the more perplexing. Despite having the option to live with my grandparents or friends, I couldn't comprehend why I had to leave my home, especially given that it was as much mine as Chloe's. Her pregnancy did not entitle her to impose her will on everyone else. I protested vehemently, but my parents insisted that, as an adult, I needed to handle my own affairs. They asserted that Chloe's need for space and her boyfriend's back injury made sharing a room impractical, and living in the living room was deemed unseemly. Ultimately, it became clear that my parents simply wanted me gone. I felt deeply betrayed, not only by my parents, but also by Chloe, who appeared self-centered and entitled. Her boyfriend's presence necessitated my departure, even though I was unprepared for it. This led to a heated confrontation with my family. In my anger, I accused them of selfishness, expressing my desire never to see them again. I quickly packed my belongings and sought assistance from friends to facilitate my move. Initially, I considered living with my maternal grandparents, but given my grandfather's illness and my grandmother's caretaking responsibilities, I decided to move in with my paternal grandparents. Upon learning the reasons behind my eviction, they were outraged and severed ties with my parents in protest. Despite the support of my grandparents and friends, I fell into a deep depression. I had always believed I had a good relationship with my family, only to be disillusioned by their actions. The situation became clearer when Chloe sent me a letter through a mutual friend, explaining her motives. According to her, her boyfriend was flirtatious, and she feared he might not fully commit to their relationship. Consequently, she persuaded our parents to evict me to eliminate any potential threat to their fragile relationship. I was astonished that Chloe would willingly have a child with a man she clearly did not trust. Her insecurity and desire to exclude me from the household were alarming. Although I contemplated confronting her and expressing my disdain for her lack of self-respect, I ultimately decided to distance myself from her and my family. Determined to move forward, I focused on my aspirations. I had never been academically inclined, which is why I took a gap year to contemplate my future. The prospect of a conventional 9-to-5 job felt suffocating. Instead, I pursued my passion for music. Being a self-taught musician proficient in both guitar and drums, a skill I had honed since the age of 12, I believed I had found my true calling. During my gap year, I came to the profound realization that becoming a magician was my true calling in life. I understood that this career path might not bring significant financial gain, but the happiness it promised was all that mattered to me. I harbored the hope that perhaps one day I could achieve great success in this field. Initially, I had no inkling that my aspirations would actually materialize, albeit to a limited extent at first. When I started out, I was performing at small gigs and faced severe financial difficulties. I was heavily reliant on my grandparents for financial support, and it took me a considerable amount of time to save enough money to afford even a modest apartment. This apartment was so small that I had to share it with a roommate. Gradually, I began securing slightly more serious gigs. At the beginning of this year, I auditioned for a role with a music producer, who I will not name, and I successfully landed the gig. I will be playing the guitar for a few songs in a film, for which I am being generously compensated. I have already received an advance payment, allowing me to move into a better apartment, with the remainder to be paid upon the project's completion. With my growing resume, I anticipate receiving even more opportunities in the future. Until now, only a few close friends and my grandparents were aware of my progress. However, somehow, my parents found out, despite my not having posted anything on social media yet, as I prefer to wait until everything is more certain. 2 days ago, my family unexpectedly located my residence and appeared at my doorstep. Their visit was clearly motivated by their need for my assistance, given that I am now doing relatively well. Both my parents are retired, and they require support for my sister and her child. When they arrived, I was too stunned to invite them in, so I just stood there, unable to react. They congratulated me and expressed their intention to reconcile, driven not only by familial ties, but also by their need for help. Chloe's boyfriend had left her 2 years prior, and upon learning of my involvement in a film soundtrack, they decided to reach out, recognizing it as a significant achievement. They explained that Chloe was struggling with her business, which she had started after her boyfriend left. With both my parents retired as of last year, they were now looking to me to step up and support my sister. They hoped I would not turn them away, emphasizing that despite the time that had passed and previous conflicts, we were still family and should support each other. I found their plea quite ironic and laughable, as they had not supported me when I needed it. They were seeking my help now only because Chloe was without support. Although she received child support, it was insufficient for the future. Chloe had been managing a flower shop with a friend, but it was not thriving. Their appeal for help struck me as hypocritical, especially when I recalled the letter Chloe had sent me the day after I left. She had been uncertain about her relationship with her boyfriend, but had still chosen him over maintaining a good relationship with me, leading to her current predicament. I asked them to wait outside while I retrieved the letter from my house. I handed it to Chloe and asked her to read it aloud to our parents so they could understand why they had ostracized me. Chloe turned red with embarrassment and refused to read it, so I read it myself. After I finished, my parents looked shocked and embarrassed, realizing they had been manipulated. They were also visibly upset with Chloe for having known all along that her boyfriend was unreliable, yet having chosen to place her faith in him. Consequently, she had jeopardized not only her future, but also made things difficult for our parents, who now had no choice but to support her. None of them could find words to respond after the letter was read, so I told them that they fully deserved their current circumstances, especially Chloe. She had knowingly sacrificed everything for an unworthy relationship, and I felt no obligation to assist her. Chloe began to cry and accused me of being insensitive, saying she had hoped I would be more compassionate given her love for her boyfriend and her efforts to keep him from abandoning her and their child. She admitted that her judgment had been clouded, especially with the pressures of impending motherhood, but she felt it was unjust to blame her for her current situation. Having nothing more to say, I shut the door and told them to leave. Since then, I have received numerous messages from Chloe's friends, accusing me of insensitivity and stating that Chloe has been inconsolable ever since. I have resolved not to apologize for my words, as the comments from others have made me realize that Chloe's actions were not only abnormal, but also unacceptable. She indeed deserved the consequences, and if she expects me to apologize after having her friends criticize me, she is mistaken. It was necessary for someone to confront her with the truth, and it fell upon me to do so given the audacity she had to seek my help after everything that transpired. Naturally, I do not place the blame solely on her. My parents were equally at fault. However, the situation would not have arisen at all if she had exercised some common sense. I had to exert considerable effort to reach my current position, and I am not inclined to dispense even a single dollar to anyone whom I do not believe to be deserving. Even if her business is currently struggling, at the very least, she still possesses it and has the opportunity to make the most of her circumstances. There is no need for her to behave as though she is a charity case, in my opinion. My parents and even my sister have always been the type of individuals who believe they should consistently be thriving. The moment they encounter any difficulties, they begin to act irrationally, as though they might lose everything the very next day. In my opinion, they lack any semblance of fighting spirit, and I am relieved that I am not like them. I recount this because even during my middle school years, I recall that my father lost his job due to a crisis at the company where he was employed. Regardless of the particulars of the crisis, which I no longer remember, the reaction from my family was one of complete hysteria. My father ended up borrowing a substantial amount of money from our grandparents, despite the fact that my parents had their own savings and my mother was employed at the time. There was no legitimate reason for panic. Nonetheless, to this day, they have not repaid the borrowed money. They likely did not take it seriously because the lenders were my grandparents. Currently, they appear to be repeating the same pattern, but this time it is my sister's business that is suffering. Unlike my grandparents, I do not feel any obligation to assist her. She can either manage on her own or seek help from someone else, as I am genuinely uninterested in getting involved. To provide an update, last week, my family arrived at my doorstep. Subsequently, Chloe's friends began sending me numerous messages, accusing me of insensitivity and insisting that I should apologize to her. Naturally, I did not apologize. Following that, for the past few days, I had no contact with them as I was quite occupied with work and other commitments. Last night, I returned home around 10 p.m., utterly exhausted, only to have my parents call me at that precise moment. They used a burner phone, so I did not recognize the number and assumed it was a work-related call. Upon answering, my parents informed me that they had made the decision to sever ties with my sister. The suddenness of it all left me speechless, as I had not anticipated this development. I assumed it was Chloe who needed my assistance, not my parents, and I failed to see what they stood to gain by cutting her out of their lives. I responded by stating that it was welcome news, but emphasized that I still wanted no involvement with them due to their past treatment of me. It was not a situation I could readily forgive or forget. Despite the passage of time, my resolve remained firm. I did not want any relationship with my parents. I was content with my life, free from family contact, and I doubted that anyone in my position would easily move past such events. Had I had a strained relationship with them from the beginning and been ousted at 18, perhaps I could have accepted it more readily. However, the shock of it all was overwhelming, and it took a long time for me to come to terms with it emotionally. Now, having reached that point, I am determined to keep them out of my life. I made it unequivocally clear that their relationship with Chloe did not concern me, as I desired no relationship with them in any capacity. This was my final decision. As I was about to end the call, my mother stopped me, claiming that they had fulfilled my wishes and therefore I needed to support them. I was utterly baffled by this assertion and asked them to elaborate. They revealed that they believed I had disclosed the truth about Chloe's actions to manipulate them into severing ties with her, with the expectation that I would then be willing to rebuild my relationship with them and assist them in the future, now that they were retired. I was more confused than ever, as I had never insinuated such intentions. Their assumptions were entirely their own, not mine. I explained that I had not given any such hints, but my parents began yelling, accusing me of misleading them and demanding that I promise to help them whenever required in the future. They explained that they had spent significant sums supporting Chloe, particularly in covering her bills and raising her son, and now feared that they had not saved enough for their own retirement. With no other options, they intended to rely on me and were appalled at my refusal to support them. Perplexed and frustrated, I decided to end the conversation and hung up while they were still talking about their expectations. I subsequently blocked the number they had used and resolved to avoid answering calls from unrecognized numbers. I am considering installing applications to help screen unknown numbers, as I am utterly exasperated with my family and desire no contact with them. I have also discussed the situation with my grandparents, who support my decision to sever ties completely and prevent any further communication. Since the day I opened my door to them, My personal life has deteriorated significantly. In hindsight, I regret that decision deeply.